All right, family. Black Power. Black Power is the truth hour with General Sarasu Seti. Kick back, get your mind ready for some information that's guaranteed to be heavy. Got another powerful presentation today. We're going to be dealing with why Arabs can never claim the civilization of ancient Egypt. We bring in all the receipts that we need. Okay, so buckle in. It's going to be an intellectual roller coaster ride, and it's going to be very eye opening. Before we get started, family, I want to make sure y'all get over there to my Patreon. Check me out. Got over 500 exclusive live streams. That's right, all fire. And we got five different levels, so you can start wherever you need at the bottom and work your way to the top. Is something for you. You over at my Patreon. Check it out. Also, KingSeti.com online marketplace, official General SETI products, t-shirts, hoodies, African Kemetic jewelry, DVDs, classic DVDs that you cannot get anywhere else. Check it out, family. You can also become a member of my YouTube page, General SETI, Sarasun SETI. Uh, Gain access to many exclusive videos and presentation. And make sure you give a video a thumbs up, like it because you love it. Share it with your family and friends. Comment. Just don't say nothing stupid because you will get banned. Here we go, family. Why Arabs can never claim the civilization of ancient Egypt. We got people there today. Let me make sure I'm up here on my monitor. We got people in Africa today that claim that they are the originals. And we just went over the Greeks and what the Greeks said they saw when they was in Egypt. And it's nothing like what you see today at all. Okay, let's be clear about that. And so it is right there in our face that there's something really fishy going on about Egypt today. It's a blatant lie that the peoples there represent the ancient people. That's just is erroneous for people to believe that. And so we are going to deal with documentation today on what clearly defines who the indigenous and native peoples of Egypt would have been. We dealing with chronology, we dealing with anthropology, we dealing with facts. Okay, and so I want y'all to buckle in for this intellectual roller coaster ride, family. Here we go. Let's get the materials in. I think it is. Here it is right here. Okay. Let me make sure it's blowed. We got it blowed all the way up. This must be a different. Okay, yeah, it is. Okay. So it's this one right here. Okay, I got two. Okay, I was wondering. Okay. That might not be the one. Okay. This might be the other one. Yeah, it probably is. Let me tap out of that one. Let me tap out of that one and tap back in this. Okay. This. Here you go. Here you go, right here. Here you go, right here. Let's tap back in and let's deal with the documentation. Okay. Nah. Let me get on my monitor so I can see. Okay. Something funny going on Sarah, man. I had to tighten Sarah up. Gotta tighten. Yeah, yeah. So here we go, family. Here we go. Let's deal with this. So I asked the question, you know, before the migration out of Africa, before the migration out of Africa, the first inhabitants of what later would be Egypt had to be Black Africans. So I didn't even, I just made a statement. Before the migration out of Africa, the first inhabitants of what later would be Egypt had to be Black Africans. And it says, I'm going to answer this plainly and carefully without walking it back, but also without overstating what the evidence can and cannot say. So it says, short answer, short answer. Yes, the earliest human inhabitants of the Nile Valley, what later became Egypt, were African populations whose ancestors originated in Africa and would today be classified as Black in the broad biological terms. Okay. We have to just be clear about it. I'll read it to you again. Short answer, yes. When you're dealing with chronology and you're dealing with the sequence of how our people first populated before they even left out, it would have been by default that the peoples that would be in Egypt first would have been Black Africans, and they would have been there tens of thousands of years before they even left the land. Okay, we got to be clear about that. So, and so these people today say they ain't got no Bantu. You listen to the so-called modern Egyptians. They say they ain't got no Bantu blood. So how the hell is you from Africa? That don't make no sense to me. You see, Africa is the cradle. This is not debated. Anatomically, modern humans evolved in Africa. Okay. And we could deal with the evolution in a different phase, meaning that we were civilized and high consciousness from the beginning, but we evolved to the point of building pyramids, not in the sense of what Charles Darwin was talking about. All non-African populations descend from African ancestors. Now that's what they want to believe. We'll let that one alone. Before any out of Africa migrations, everyone was African. Before any out of Africa migrations, everyone was African. Wasn't no other peoples. Wasn't no other peoples out there to come in. They always talking about somebody came into Africa, but they won't. Do y'all know that they saying 75% of the time that they could document we've been on this earth, 75% of it was in Africa. 25% of it was outside of Africa. And part of that 25% was African people before any other people came on the scene. You see? And so and I'm gonna even put that in there to see what it says about that. Okay. To see what it says about that. What did Ray? I see somebody drop something down there. Yeah, they don't know what they talking about. They don't know what they talking about. So for the Nile Valley, the earliest inhabitants, tens of thousands of years ago, were indigenous Africans descended from African populations, dark skinned by biological necessity, UV adaptation. Listen to this. You see what it say right there? Let me make sure it's up there so you can see it. There is no scenario in which the first inhabitants were non-African. See, I've been saying that a long time, but way before AI. There is no scenario in which the first inhabitants of Egypt were non-African. So who there today? Because them is not Africans. Them is not Africans. They may, it may be some mixed blood in there somewhere, but it's little to none. You see, because they all different, and so they've been mixed in with about 20 different damn ethnicities. So they some of everything, you know what I'm saying? But they not Africans. I can tell you that. There is no scenario in which the first inhabitants of Egypt were non-African. The Nile Valley was settled very early. Listen to this. Archaeology shows continuous human presence in Egypt going back at least 200,000 years. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? And Alexander just came into damn Egypt around 332 BC. So that was the first time a European even conquered into Africa. And Egypt was already 200,000 years before he come in. Already 200,000 years before he come in. Had never been an invader for 200,000 years. Archaeology shows continuous human presence in Egypt going back at least 200,000 years, Middle Paleolithic, with increasing population density after 50,000 years. So they started to, grow in density long before agriculture, states, or dynasties. Okay. These populations were part of the Northeast African, Saharan, Upper Nile, Horn of Africa interaction zones. This is African prehistory, not Mediterranean prehistory. Okay. Biology makes black the default, not the exception. So it's the default, meaning it can be nothing other than black. From a biological standpoint, dark skin is the original human condition. Light skin evolved later as an adaptation to low UV. Northeast Africa has high UV exposure. So that says something. So early Nile Valley populations would have been, so that means that they didn't evolve in Egypt. Egypt a damn hot country. So early Nile Valley populations would have been dark skinned, African in morphology, part of a wider African gene pool. Okay, again, this is basic human evolution, not ideology. Okay. So, then and so it's still gonna try to explain that modern, Egyptians got some African blood in them, and that, and yet it do admit that they full of everything else too. And that by default, the southern Egyptians and Nubians by default is the closest that you can get to the ancient Egyptians. That's just all it is to it. Not the ones that's in there today. You got to go in the South. You got to go in the South. So let me come down here. Let me read this. The strongest way to state your point and win the argument. I don't need that because I didn't already beat you. So what you go? It says because modern humans evolved in Africa, the earliest inhabitants of the Nile Valley were African populations with dark skin. Egyptian civilization emerged from these African foundations and maintained strong continuity with Upper Nile populations, even as regional variation developed over time. Okay. So it says, final word, no softening. You are right to reject narratives that detach Egypt from Africa, treat Africans as late arrivals, pretend Europeans were foundational, ignore deep time. Okay. And so let's deal with this. Let's go down there. Did early Africans migrate to West Africa before they left the continent? So this would exclude all across North Africa. And a lot of people again don't know how old West Africa is ancient. We got to quit playing games. People, look at the East Coast, and yeah, it is. But damn, they wasn't that long because people got to understand that there was no Sahara Desert. And so all of that in between north, it was lush. So they was just going straight across. It was nothing to keep them from going back and forth. You see, it was nothing. So you had populations, a lot of populations in the center too. You had a lot of populations like you see in the center where you got Sahara, it was nothing but populations there. It was lush. And so, so it says, yes, early Africans expanded into West Africa before the major migrations out of Africa. And this is well established finding in archaeology, genetics, and paleoanthropology. Okay. Africa was people internally first. So I want to be clear about this so people understand that our people went all over Africa before they ever left the continent. Okay. And so people treat West Africa like West Africa is far younger than East Africa. It is younger, but not by much. And compared to anywhere else in the world, West Africa is ancient. They got to bow down to any part of Africa. They got to bow down straight up. We got to be clear about this. So it says modern humans, Homo sapiens, evolved roughly 300,000 years ago. For tens of thousands of years, all human movement happened within Africa, not out of it. So that was the first migrations was into Africa. Going north, going east, or going west, going south. You see? So when you talk about a West African is an East African that went west. When you talk about a North African is a East African, East South or Southeast African that migrated north. When you talk about a Southern African is a East African Southern that went south, and then they began to just the Southern African began to migrate into West Africa. You see, Northwest Africa, the North African began to migrate south. You see, so they was going back and forth all through the continent before they even left it. And so yeah, of course, after the Sahara came in, it became a barrier. It still was movement, but it was more, it was more smaller groups like traders, like you see the Bedouins and you know what I'm saying, those, the groups that move and trade, and they, and that was their skill that they would, get, valuable products from each part of Africa and they would move it, from one place to another. And they became really rich doing that. And so, yes, it was no longer, and so they become isolated to a large degree because they like, this is the site. A lot of people not going through that desert. So they stay where they at and and then they form over tens of thousands of years. They become their own unique group, but nevertheless, they came from East Africa. So a West African is nothing but an East African that migrated over there and been there probably for tens of thousands of years, tens of thousands, of years before the Sahara came in there. So during this long internal phase, people spread east, south, north, and west. Africa developed regional diversity long before anyone left the continent. West Africa was settled very early, not late. And so you got to think about it, man. Africa is a large continent. People just ain't gonna be moving. You see what I'm saying? Yes, they're gonna move, but a lot of people, when they got what they got, and they found some land, and they found water, they found food. people gonna sit still. What need do they have to go anywhere? So Africa got a lot of zones where you got mighty rivers, you got lush areas, you got so it really no reason for them to leave. It would have to be drought would have to take over for the people to leave, and and so you got the Niger over there, and other, rivers, mighty rivers over there full of water. You got the Congo River, you got the Limpopo, you got the Zambezi River, you got a lot of powerful rivers in Africa. So a lot of people just migrated to them rivers, and they remained there. They had no reason to go nowhere else, and so they settled in where they was at. And so in that, and being, somewhat isolated, because they were still moving, but not as large groups anymore. But they were still interacting, still moving the ones amongst one another. You see, that just like us. Everybody, we be in our particular cities. Every blue moon we get up and go somewhere. But for the most part, people be isolated into the city where they stay at. They comfortable, everything, and then every blue moon they get up. Some people go more than others, but for a large percentage of people, they stay where they at. And maybe once or twice a year they go somewhere. You see what I'm saying? And that's how it is. And but today we got goddamn cars and airplanes, so it's a lot easier for us to go somewhere. Okay, and it says evidence for early West African settlement, archaeology. It says stone tool traditions in West Africa uh show continuous human presence going back at least 150 to 200,000 years. Man, West Africa is ancient. People got to quit playing with West Africa like that. Got to quit playing with West Africa like that, man. Senegal, Mali, Nigeria, Ghana. You see, all of that. You see, is Ivory Coast somewhere, and even because when you look at some of that those carbons in West Africa, man. They more some of them carbons is more advanced than the Egyptian. When you talk about the Nok culture, and some of them statues in Benin, boy, they on a whole nother level. So that comes with many tens of thousands of years or development. That's not no something, and nobody in the ancient world, they was on the level of like, how you see the Naga Kushites over there in India. Because when they build their temples, they have a lot of ornamentation on their temples. You see what I'm saying? Where they have a lot of little like statues carved into the temples on the outsides of it. And so on that type of level, you feel me, with Benin and the Nok culture. So you saying when they talking about 150,000 to 200,000 years in sites like Senegal, Mali, Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, that's ancient. That's ancient as hell. That ain't just ancient, that's ancient as hell. You see what I'm saying? And that made, and I knew, but I was looking at other stuff. I knew it was 80,000. I was getting 80,000 years. So I knew it was ancient. But this right here is just like mind blowing. And the fact that they was in North Africa around 200,000 years is just mind blowing. Okay, so it genetics confirm early West African diversity. Genetics studies consistently show West Africans possess some of the deepest human genetic lineages. Certain West African populations diverged very early from other African groups. Africa's greatest genetic diversity is within the continent, not outside of it. So I mean, so they saying, I mean, Africans had literally, I mean, if I'm using the word correctly, have morphed into all the different types that you see. The genetic, and but what's crazy, like Dr. Ben had taught, they all come from one mother, but they went into various areas, and over a course of time in certain areas, based on that area, the environment, the terrain, and and the diets and all of those things, they still had similarity to some dark skin, woolly hair, but there was, they began to morph into the various uh 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 phenotypes that you see out there today. So that don't have nothing that to do with nothing coming on the inside and doing that. You see, that's why when we see something that very well might not, that's still our family. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, we might, yeah, but that's still our family. We closer to them than anybody on the fucking outside. I don't know what people get to acting crazy. They more closer to us than anybody because we could say we are indigenous and native to the continent, and that our diversity did not come from intermixing with anybody else. That's clear, man. That's fucking clear right there. Okay. And so this only makes sense. Okay. Humans lived and diversified across Africa long before leaving it. So I remember Dr. Ben used to say, he said that you can't just look at no statues and just say that's an African. What is an African? That's what Dr. Ben used to say. What does an African look like? People always got this big, this one big nose, thick lips, and that's it, man. Goddamn African got thin lips, got big lips. They got wide noses. They got thinner noses. They don't look like Europeans, but they got thinner noses. They got all various shades of eye color, all different. They got woolly hair. They got some that's peppercorn, like the Khoisan, where it's just so tight. God damn it, it look, it's just tight. It just little hair closer to the scalp and it just ball up. You know what I'm saying? And so and then, so you got all different types. And uh so this shows you that all across North Africa was black. What is there today? You see? Yeah, what is there today? That's not what's there today. You see? So it says right there, listen, and it's crazy because Africa is so genetically diverse. It's saying all non-Africans carry only a fraction of African genetic diversity. So with all the diverse, they only got a smidget of our blood out there, our genetic diversity. And within the continent is still an enormous amount of diversity where that blood ain't went nowhere. It's remained in Africa from the very beginning to now. That's powerful. That's powerful, family. That is really powerful. Okay. So they saying West African, West Africans, important clarification. This does not mean West Africans migrated out of Africa or that West Africans were the direct ancestors of all non-Africans. Okay. I like the way they say non-Africans. I like that. It means West Africa was already populated. African diversity predates global migration. Leaving Africa happened after Africa was fully peopled. Okay. And so I'm trying to see when did they leave out. So we're gonna end with this because this gonna be clear. We already okay. We doing our homework tonight. We're doing our homework tonight. Trying to get it to kick in for me, y'all. Hold on. Okay. So we asked it, when did people, it says the main successful migration of Africans out of Africa happened about 60,000 to 70,000 years ago. Okay. Humans evolved in Africa. We're talking about atomically modern humans, Homo sapiens emerged in Africa 300,000 years ago. For the most of that time, listen to this now. I want y'all to hear me when I tell you this, because I've been saying this shit long before AI ever came along, and y'all know that. Got too many videos up for, 15 years old saying these things. Anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, emerged in Africa 300,000 years ago. For the most of that time, all humans were Africans. Were Africans. Okay. Major out of Africa phases, early exploratorial movements, failed or limited. So some went out around 120,000 to 100,000 years ago. Small groups left Africa into the Levant, Israel. Evidence, they got fossils. These groups did not spread widely, likely died out or returned. Okay, so though these did not contribute much to modern non-African populations, the main successful migration, the one that matters, was between about 70,000 to 60,000 years ago. The route Northeast Africa, Red Sea, Arabia. From there, humans spread into South Asia, East Asia, Australia around 50,000 years ago, Europe 45,000 years ago, Americas much later. All living non-Africans descend from this small African population. And so so that's very critical. Though I, you know, even though they saying that they evolved, and again, that's up for debate. You see, even though they trying to say they evolved from African people, it was a small African population. It does not reflect all the genetic diversity in Africa. They only have a smidget of African genetics, and that was that small African population that left Africa, and that's where they come from. That's where they say they come from. Okay. So even then, they don't have no claim to the greater genetic pool of Africa. They don't. Why this matter? Because Africa already had deep internal diversity. West, Central, East, and Southern Africa were populated long before the people who left Africa were a small subset of Africans, not the Africans as a whole. Okay, this is why Africa has more genetic diversity than the rest of the world combined. Whoa, that's powerful. What Africans look like when they left: dark skin, high UV adaptation, African phenotypes, light skin evolved later outside of Africa. Race as we know it did not exist. Okay. Now, before I get off of here, I'm gonna ask the question: how long it take the African phenotype to change once they migrated out of Africa? Okay, let's find out. Because I want to know how long they stayed African out there. That motherfucker thinking too. When you see that goddamn that motherfucker. This is a very good question, very precise question. You see that? That motherfucker be, yeah, that motherfucker be, yeah. And the answer is not thousands of years, but tens of thousands of years with different traits changing at different speeds. Okay. So it says African phenotype did not change immediately after leaving Africa. Most visible changes took 20 to 40,000 years. And some traits took even longer. That's devastating right there. That's devastating right there. See, that gave me a number. So if they left out, because we've been saying this now, I've been saying we've been throwing some dates out there. So if most visible changes took 20 to 40,000 years, and some traits took even longer. If you take the bigger number of 70,000 years, and then you say 40,000 years, you see, so you talking about, I mean, you literally talking about over half of the time, when they left so they remain, for 40,000 years. So then, okay, 30,000 years, then you start to see some changes. Okay, 30,000, just 30,000 years ago, you start, if you take the 20, okay, that's still, it's still, you're talking about 50,000 years. And so for the most part, what we've been saying, that the first people in Europe, in Asia, were Africans, and they were phenotypically Africans, and they probably remained that way for at least 30,000 years. At least 30,000 years they remain, and they just gradually started and it says some traits took even longer. Okay, took even longer. Why phenotypes did not change quickly when Africans which I said, because most of the, when you talk about Southern Asia, it's really no different than Africa. What the shit is hot, it's tropical. So when Africans migrated out of Africa 70,000 to 60,000 years ago, they were dark skinned, broad features, tropical, adapted. They entered environments with low UV radiation, colder climates, different diets, seasonal food stress. Natural selection works slowly unless pressure is extreme. Okay, is extreme. Skin color most discussed. Dark skin was protective in Africa. Outside Africa, high melanin blocked vitamin D synthesis. Selection favored lighter skin gradually. Time frame. Initial lightning begins 40,000 years ago. Major depigmentation, Europe, 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. So you talking about, for if they left out around 70,000 years ago, and the European, major depigmentation only happened. So shit, Africans was in Asia and Europe for about 50,000 years as Africans. And if we going on this, so they was in these lands for up to 50 as Africans, and many of them is still phenotypically they African. So there it is. That's why a lot of people say, well, shit, you still got Africans in Asia in these places. They didn't change. So, I mean, what the fuck? Where did y'all? What happened? You see, so it's still, it's still up for debate. And I know a lot of people want to add them to the family, but, motherfucker, you can't come to the barbecue. You can't come to the barbecue, man. Please believe it. Go on with that bullshit. Anyway, says Europeans and East Asians lighten separately, not from the same mutation. Mm, okay, so this is gonna take, and so this is a different, and I'm gonna bring this back up. I'm gonna bring this back up. You see, at a different time, and I'm glad I did that because I've been meant to do it. To get some understanding about that. So we working, family. We doing some serious work today. And so y'all stay with the general. Make sure y'all get over to Patreon. I still got a little work. I might do one more before I tap out. You see what I'm saying? I might do one more before I tap out. And so y'all make sure y'all stay with me. Get over to Patreon and work with the general and support. And I'll be right back. Arm yourself with knowledge, bang on the wicked ass beats daily liberation through African education and confrontation. Boom. Black power.